the next piece of this program, we're gonna end up getting up and moving around again a little bit. But what I want to do now is actually turn the microphone over to Nancy Walsh from Montgomery Bar Association. She's going to lead off in the description of the next piece of our breakout session. Nancy?
Good morning, everyone. I am Nancy Walsh, the Director of Engagement, Leadership, and Community Outreach at the Montgomery Bar Association. Thanks to the openness and vision of Jim Walters, who has not gotten a shout out today but should. Thank you. I have had the distinct privilege of working with the emerging leaders of the Health and Human Services Department on a journey of self-discovery, relationship building, connection, and vulnerability. Kind of some common themes we got going here today, of course. You're going to hear more about that journey and its clear and powerful connection to the essential work of everyone in this room in just a moment. But before I introduce the group's representative, I'd just like to shine a spotlight on this incredible team. So if my emerging leaders who are kind of over there, kind of stand, raise your hand. There. Without taking up too much time, because Lauren is going to explain more about what they do, but know this. If this group represents the leadership of the future leadership of this county, the future's bright indeed. You are in very good hands. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Lauren Landers-Tabarez, who will tell you more about our journey.
Good morning, everybody. So, as Nancy said, I'm Lauren Landers-Tabarez. I'm one of the emerging leaders. There are about 15 of us that have been milling about this room today. We are a diverse group of professionals from the Department of Health and Human Services. We represent my office, which is the Office of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Early Intervention. We also represent the Office of Children and Youth, Housing and Community Development, veterans, managed care, senior services, community connections, the Early Learning Resource Center, performance and planning, community info and education, and public health. Did I miss anybody? No. All right. So there's a few of us. We came here, or we joined this Emerging Leaders cohort to learn to be leaders with the ultimate goal of creating and fostering relationships and setting a firm foundation for more integrative work within the Department of Health and Human Services. But integration doesn't just mean that we integrate our own department. We need to integrate with other county offices outside of Health and Human Services, with provider agencies, constituents, and with you, our faith leaders. Like our goal as emerging leaders to create and foster relationships, you are all here with the ultimate goal of networking, sharing needs, learning about resources, and building a foundation for an interfaith coalition. Like some of our panelists have touched on, we're here to build a bridge of trust. Our work in Health and Human Services and your work as faith leaders is a parallel process from which we can build that bridge. Instead of a service opportunity, I'm stealing this from another panelist, this is an opportunity to build a community. So what did we do as emerging leaders? We opened our leadership cohort by sharing our personal stories in a room full of, at that time, strangers. It was very, very scary. We laughed, we cried, and we were vulnerable, which was our first of many lessons that we learned, was that being vulnerable is a key part of being an effective leader. That's also why I'm standing here today shaking a little bit. So the next thing we did was some self-assessments where we learned about our personalities, right? So Myers-Briggs, anyone familiar with the Myers-Briggs? Yeah? Okay. So we learned about all the differences, the intuitors, the sensors, right? The intuitors are, big picture people kind of up in the clouds. The sensors are the more kind of down-to-earth facts, kind of what's right in front of them. So Nancy very starkly showed us the difference when she held up this big, no, you didn't hold it up, projected, big picture. It was like brilliant clouds, and there was like a boat and some hands, and the sun was shining, and there was a clock. And she said, okay, intuitors, what do you see? And we were like, oh, time travel, God, religion. And then she said, sensors, what do you see? And they said, boat, cloud, hand. So to steal from another panelist, right, there are no perfect people. There's no one right way to think and to be. There are strengths in both of those ways of perceiving. So speaking of strengths, we also did the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment. I see some nodding heads, some people are familiar. So it breaks you up into 4 different categories, right? There's 4 different categories of strengths. There's the influencing, the executing, strategic thinking, and relationship building. So not surprisingly, us health and human services folks scored the highest in the relationship building, right? And highest in empathy, harmony, inclusion, and connectedness. So when you listen to the panelists and when you look around the room today, I would venture to guess that that would be the same as everybody else in the room here. So finally, we got into the practical skills, right? Being an effective communicator, empowering, delegating. But what we realized along the way was that those practical skills that we all came there to learn, tell us, Nancy, like, how do I effectively lead a room full of people? It wasn't about learning the skill, it was about going through the process, learning to be vulnerable, learning about ourselves, learning how to speak to each other, playing on each other's strengths. Being vulnerable was more important to becoming an effective leader than those practical skills. So we're here today for our final project. Yes, you're our guinea pigs. In a few minutes, the emerging leaders are going to be breaking you all into discussion groups. We have another vulnerable leader who's going to be facilitating, and then after that, yet another vulnerable leader who's going to be facilitating an entire group discussion. So in those small groups, we're going to task you with going through the same process that we've gone through as emerging leaders. Be vulnerable, listen, share, empower, play to each other's strengths. Undoubtedly, some of you will become emerging leaders within this Interfaith coalition. You'll be propelling forward a strong, integrated foundation of professionals and faith-based leaders in this county. It's not about the service, it's about building that community. So, thank you. And a little bit of housekeeping. So please just remain seated while I give out these instructions. The emerging leaders are spread out around the room. They have numbers. If you look at your name badge, you'll see that you have a number. If you don't worry. I have instructions for you too. So when I say go, please find your number. Bring your chair with you. Now, not everybody's capable of carrying a chair around the room, so if you need help, please let your emerging leader know. They will carry the chair over for you. We're going to be breaking out into these small groups, and our emerging leader, Hannah, is going to be facilitating. If you do not have a number on your name badge, please come to me, and I will make sure you get assigned to a group. So now I'm going to turn over to Hannah Weisberg, emerging leader, and you may all go. Thank you. All right. I'm going to have you go to group 3, please.
I figured this will probably take.
Well, I mean, it's a big issue. It's, yeah.
Right now, a lot of children are definitely being taken away from their parents, but trying to bring on other agencies. So trying to bridge that gap that I hear so
I volunteered at Georgetown Presbyterian Church. Last part of mine, before I retired, now I'm working again, but to serve body minds don't understand who they are and what they're going through. They feel that they can enter into their churches because of the amount of disability that they have.
This cannot be a haunted house entertainment. But in our community, that's the mindset of the average person on the street. So if they see your folks from Indian Health,
And I'm from not from around here, so I can
We're a decently large congregation, and we're fortunate to have a decent endowment, so that means that we have a pretty large amount of money that we're able to use for therapy.
they probably don't go to a church or belong to a church. They're just basically coming to get what it is that they need. You know, like I said, I'm in the heart of Norristown, so it's hard to figure out how to help you.
I know our health department has a whole program and they're working with residents, but I'm not sure if it's growing or less.
Okay, I hope that your conversations kind of bubbled up some inspiring and challenging thoughts, and that this will just be the beginning of ongoing conversations. We're going to go through each question and kind of share out the different comments. And one of the things I encourage you to do as we're kind of finding our commonalities and finding the areas of difference is to take note of those things and maybe just take 15 minutes after you leave here today and jot down your thoughts, reflect on your experience, and kind of pull out some key takeaways, because that will help you as you move forward. We all get inspired and excited when we come together in a group like this, and then we go back to work and do our day-to-day, and we forget that, oh, that's right, I was going to change the world after that conference, but I got busy with meetings. So don't lose that momentum. What I'm going to do is ask my co-facilitator Toika to come up, and together we're going to kind of tag team, go around, jot down your notes, and we will share these. Maybe what we can do, Jim, I don't know if this is possible, is take snapshots of these full flip charts and email them out as well, so that you can kind of see what the group think looks like. Okay? So let's, Toika, do you want to start with note-taking, or do you want to start? Okay. All right. So I think this first question is going to be a bit of the easier ones, because we all know what we're asked, and then we're going to be challenged to dig a little deeper on the other ones. So if I could start with, where's group one? Let me get my bearings here. Group one, would you like to share what some of the needs your congregants or members bring to you on a regular basis? And we want the full scoop. You win.
Yes. The needs that we came up with were financial needs, help with children, as far as resourcing ways that they can be housed and fed and transported, especially with grandparents involved, shelter, food, relationships, spiritual and mental health. I think those were the main ones.
Awesome. I'm just going to ask, as you share your thoughts, to kind of be mindful of Toika and myself as we're taking notes, and if we fall behind, just kind of slow down a little bit so we can make sure we capture everything. Group two, I'm also asking as we go around the room, if your thoughts have already been stated, just in the interest of us getting to new thoughts, don't feel like you have to repeat them. Okay, go ahead.
A lot of ours paralleled those same thoughts. Let's see, financial support. That's already up there. Helping folks who are homebound. We talked a little bit about reducing stigma.
I think everything else is up there. Getting more diversity in our congregations.
Great.
Did I miss anything?
Great, thanks.
All right.
And just so you know, we won't always start with table 1, so those of you who are last and will have nothing left to say this time, will have plenty to say the next time. Yes, absolutely. Table 3.
Oh, thank you. We have health needs, programming needs, support groups, questions about Medicare and services, fall and medication issues, grief issues, loneliness, confusion about benefits, mental health, addiction, education needs. Education needs, financial needs, transportation, childcare. I think that's it.
A note. Even though I'm just gonna back up a little bit and change my tune on this. Certainly we don't want to keep repeating the same thing, but it might be worthwhile. Maybe we won't write the same points down twice, but if, I'm hearing financial in every group. Perhaps it is worth sharing what your group said, even if it's repetitive, so we can take note of the top points that we're hearing over and over again. So, apologize for that. Go ahead.
So we also had monetary assistance for food, gas, etc. We also had isolation from families with disabilities, dealing with disruptive members, needs associated with economic hardships, and then basically, once again, food and goods.
We said housing, financial relationships, transportation, food, health concerns, spiritual concerns, mental health, employment, and then the difficulties of being different and the education on disabilities and that type of thing.
Just pointing out, and I'm sure you're all picking this up, but as you're jotting your notes, I think what's helpful if we start to kind of naturally categorize these specific needs into groups that go together, because the notion of relationships and getting rid of stigma and building community, we're all saying it different ways, and maybe if in our minds we kind of clump them together, we address it as a broad need and work from the specifics there. So if we could do the same in our thought process with resources, with skills, with programming, and think about how as a group you could attack these in a systematic way as we're talking.
So our group really highlighted the same that was identified, especially the financials and housing and lack of connection and kind of clarity, maybe getting immediate assistance and then not having that kind of follow-up to walk alongside. Transportation was also a huge concern and barrier for people. And also kind of people waiting for the last moment, like the crisis has arrived and they need immediate help versus maybe some things that could have been done earlier on.
Yeah, again, we would, echo what was already said, but just to add in legal forensic piece, we just spoke with you, Nancy, about that. But then, so all of those issues, but they're looking for someone specific of their faith to help them with those issues. Did I say that correctly?
Great.
So like Christian counseling, for example.
as we go through this, even just listing our common needs and our common concerns, we begin to start coming up with solutions or approaches in the process of even talking about them. This is the simplest question by far, and I'm already seeing, oh, what if we take this, this, and this, and we attach a faith to it, or we attach a denomination to it? So that's what you should be doing as we're talking, and then what happens next, when you all come back together again, is where kind of the real magic begins. Last but not least.
We discussed financial needs, for example, oil or rent. We discussed housing, downsizing, food banks, recovery resource needs, assistance with children of incarcerated parents, mental health issues. And then we also discussed relation and family type things, those being issues, and grief, loss, loneliness, health issues, LGBTQ, HIV, and aging. Did I miss anything?
No small list. Would you like to switch so your hand can have a break? I would recommend we maybe start with our last group. The last shall be first this time around.
Okay, let's get into some meat and potatoes here. Your organization, religious institution may or may not be able to provide a resource that is requested. So how do you manage that situation?
We talked about high need for short-term needs, needing a connection right away. We talked about resource lists, having resource lists on hand and connecting folks. And we talked about having a release of information form that allows communication between open links, a joint collaboration, record of accountability via the release form, and then open spaces to share the information.
When you talked about open spaces, can you get an example of what you were referring to?
A resource center and a gym.
Okay. I think that's what Ms. Lawrence was talking about, having a neutral ground to share that information. Okay.
Yes. Anything else I missed?
Okay, next group.
One of the participants here mentioned that they would set up free educational seminars and that kind of thing, but they found that people would not show up to them. But other ways to manage the resources that are being requested is to get to the point of understanding the person. Sometimes people just want a person to listen to them and really hear their story and the struggles they're having, and so they're really searching for, you know, other people to kind of accept, you know, what's happening for them. What else did they say? Creating a consortium to provide strength-based services. So what was mentioned here was, you know, if the faith community comes together and figures out, you know, well, we do this really well here at our organization, but you do this really well, whether that's providing homeless services, or it's providing meals, or it's providing, you know, spiritual counseling, but so that that reduces the duplication of services and really helps kind of, you know, set up a structure for where people can be referring people to who need those specific things or resources.
Sort of like what you're doing right now with this coalition, bringing all the groups together?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We talked about the concept of the warm handoff and bridging and making connections.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody comes to us with a need, that we can provide either keeping them on the line and doing the concept of a conference call and reaching out to that agency directly, or maybe calling the agency to say, hey, this is a heads up, so-and-so might be calling you, and giving some context around that. Really that making calls on the person's behalf if we can't provide what's kind of within the function of our religious institution.
And that's building that relationship you all were talking about earlier, and how to do that personal contact will help. form handout.
We just discussed doing referrals, being aware of who can help within the community. We kind of touched on, different communities having a lack of resources or knowledge, or having, their pride being a barrier, or not feeling connected. So even using politicians and those platforms. Prayer, we said, was a very integral part of helping in situations, especially ones you feel are a little difficult, and then also connecting with resources within the county.
Just wanted one thing that just came out, because a lot of times what will happen as you throw out ideas is ideas for who to invite next to this conversation. And you talk about changing policy and policymakers and lawmakers. So consider the next time you do this, who can you bring that can perhaps not be the immediate policymaker, but a bridge to that, so you can start attacking some of these really underlying issues of trust.
We discussed connecting members with existing resources and connecting faith organizations with resource providers, overcoming stigmas, and promoting knowledge of services and resources that are offered. And we also discussed the issues associated with properly using resources that are offered.
That's the barrier.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose if anybody had the answer to that, we could.
Yeah. And I keep hearing about resources and referrals. Where are you getting the lists? Who's putting these lists together? What resources are you using to get the lists?
We talked about if someone calls for help, to always call back and connect with them. And make connections to services when you can, and to be persistent and keep looking and keep trying to solve their problem.
I just want to point out how profound this statement was. We recently did a kind of conversation, a similar kind of summit and conversation about reentry issues in the community and people coming out of jail and re-entering into the community. And there's a simulation to talk about what they went through, and we talked about all these big policy changes and these huge, government interventions in changing the system. And at the end, we thought, how about we start by being nice, by putting ourselves in their shoes, by during the simulation, people had to, people who attended the conference, and each table represented a piece of, a portion of the challenges that reentry individuals went through. I went through it, and for example, they said, oh, you have to go get food. So you can go there or there. So I used my little transportation ticket, the one that I had, and I went to the food bank because that was the shortest line, and I said, can I have food? And she said, give me your wallet. And I said, okay. She said, you have money, I can't give you free food. And I said, didn't the lady who sent me here know the rules between these two? She probably, but she doesn't have to tell you. It was all a simulation, but how often do we do that? Or how often do we just go, oh, I don't have an answer, so I'm going to put off the call? We got to start there before we start here. So that was an awesome point. Just call back.
So we talked about referrals, right? Health fairs, or just fairs, resource fairs, helping people navigate some of the more challenging resources and referrals, such as like contacting 211 your way home, which I know can be challenging for some folks. Connecting people with legal aid or other types of advocacy, like the Housing Equality Center. Networking, so going to the Interagency Council of Norristown or other types of networking groups to meet people, know who you can reach out to if you can't solve a problem yourself. And offering transportation to those places as well.
I understand also in our group, when you were talking about networking, one of the persons in our group brought up the ministeriums in their area and how it became a great network for his organization, even if there wasn't one in his particular organization, but he went to a community next to him, and that group helped him and is a good resource for the foundation that he works with.
Well, mainly, I think we hit all of them, but you said repeat them. Do you want me to repeat them still? There might be a couple things. Partnership with other organizations, which has been mentioned. We talked about the county resource sheet or the community connections, making sure people are aware of that centralized location. Networking was mentioned. Knowledge of information, like, or organizations, having somebody that actually knows the places to go and what they offer. Finding training for caregivers, for congregants, and for leaders to be able to help others by them knowing better the processes and systems. I think that's the majority of things we had.
Anybody else have anything to add on this question before we move on? That kind of service after your group?
Okay. Okay. Question 3. We believe that communities are stronger when organizations partner with each other. How can we support each other, and what partnerships can we create to enhance each other? If we can give some good examples, that would be helpful as well. And we'll start with the group behind you, Jim.
We talked about the Interagency Council in Norristown, and I believe that's open to anyone we mentioned. Okay. Community connections, I think that was brought up as well. An email distribution list, but also talking personally to various groups, including getting more involved in visiting schools, more early intervention kind of things, senior centers, and then also getting the message to the leadership in the county, coming up with like a top 10 needs list. That about covers it.
Okay. And we're going to cross the room and come to this group right here. Elizabeth's group.
Try to avoid.
Someone mentioned in our group is identifying people in your faith organization who can take the responsibility for knowing the resources. So it's not necessarily people who are here today, but maybe someone that identifies with having a struggle with mental illness themselves, and that so that they feel a part of the need to really support the people in their congregation with that. We talked about translators for the spiritual speak, that came up already. Designating someone other than themselves to participate in events like this. It was mentioned that it is during the day. Some pastors are working other jobs. They can't always attend this. But we also mentioned leveraging technology to do things and keep communication more accessible and open. And emphasizing the common bond. Getting out to where people are, having human services without walls was mentioned. And I can add on behalf of Community Connections that we do a little bit of that through our expansion site work, where the Navigants will go out to churches or libraries, food pantries, at designated times where they know people are coming in with needs, and trying to connect with the community that way, and also informing the staff or the volunteers who are working there about the services that we provide, and that all the resources that are available to their to the participants coming in there.
Okay, sounds like a bit of field work. Need to get out in the community. Okay, Doreen's group right there, Jim.
Our group really talked about partnerships of the relational components, not just providing information and names and numbers, but to a direct person instead of just go to this agency. You can connect with this person. I have a relationship. And sharing the relationship you have with that individual to the connecting person that you're sending them to is really, really important. Again, with that face-to-face connection. We also talked about the need for the after-hours resources. There's a lot of things that happen between those business hours, and then the needs kind of fall apart afterwards, and we're trying to put things into place. So providing more like whole day services or whole day resources instead of just till 5. And then we kind of talked about our dreaming of what's next. So I think that kind of sums up. Did I miss anything? Yeah. That's it? Okay.
We're going to switch up a little bit because we have limited time, but we want to get to those big picture suggestions. In that last question, is there anything else you would like to share? Consider the dreams, concerns, questions, next steps. We had a couple of suggestions in group 5. Caitlin, can you share?
So one person brought up the idea of mapping congregations within the county to see who does what well and who do they do that for. Mm-hmm. And then from there, connecting formally the congregation with the county as well as informally the congregations with one another, with people who need the resources, that type of thing. We also were discussing, kind of frustrations that were with the system. So people might like to see, short-term assistance for people who don't necessarily qualify for something more long-term to help them before it gets to a point that there's not really a place to come back from. Mm-hmm. And then I know Tara also brought up, breaking the stigma of, because she said about the saying of God heals through medicine. So knowing that getting professional help and getting medicine and going to the food pantry, they're all resources that you shouldn't be ashamed of and that you should be able to openly, reach out for. Does anybody else? All right. Is that good?
And he mentioned that there were over 1,000, I think, 1,000 congregations in Montgomery County. And another idea that was brought up as well was connecting the food banks. There are about 70, 75 food banks that the churches actually have in their congregations, but there's really not a connection of the various food banks. Yes. Okay.
Montgomery County had a covered network. Both Elizabeth and I are on the governing board along with Carrie, wherever Carrie is. And we would be delighted if you have a food bank and you're not connected with us, we'd like you to connect with us because we're all about connecting food banks across the county.
Okay,
so
excellent.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Excellent, excellent. Tori, did you have any big picture? Tori?
We think because of the first time here having the coalition that it was great, but we want to make sure that there is a follow-up to a coalition because people have seen where something big like this happens and then it does not happen again. And we all felt that we learned a lot and that, more people, more different organizations coming to it. We talked about the nursing home and assisted living facilities, and now it's sort of eye-opening, but also maybe if more of them were invited, we could network with them better so that we could address that situation. Just some here, because we're all here, and this is the big networking thing that we have. So.
Awesome. To that end, I'm going to lay out a personal challenge and ask everybody here to pick one specific thing that you are going to do as a result of today. It can be a phone call or an email to someone you never met before. It can be reaching out to a constituent, to a congregant or to a consumer or whoever you work with in a slightly different way based on something you heard today. It can be a conversation you want to have. It can be an article you want to read. But if every single one of us does one specific thing, that's kind of huge. So don't leave here today without making that commitment to yourself and, more importantly, to the residents of the county who need you.
Okay, we need to wrap up, Jim, or one more? Can we take one more? Okay, how about the group right here? Group 1, I believe.
I would probably say the only thing that would be additional to all these is there was just a big discussion about not duplicating, is that there's churches that all do the same backpack project on the same week, or the same fall festival, or the same, doing a lot of the same things, and how can we stop duplicating and start kind of cooperating together in some of those?
Okay, excellent. I think Reverend Sydney, is she still here? I think she had a good example of that in her area where the churches came together. Can you share just a little bit of what happened when you all came together? She's over here. Where churches aren't duplicating efforts and they're working together. You were telling me about your partnership with the Lutheran Church and okay.
That led to my hair? That
Yes,
one?
yeah.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, I'm Sydney Van Dyke. I'm the associate pastor at New Goshenhoppen UCC, United Church of Christ, which is up in the northern corner of Montgomery County, actually in East Greenville with John Buckley. And so we have a really great a consortium there, a ministerium that gets together. And then out of, 3 years ago was the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So the churches in our community that have direct ties to that, which are the UCC, the Lutherans, and the Schwenkfelter churches, started doing some collaborative ministries together. And we did a whole year of celebration with that in mind, but it worked so well, and all of our communities loved being together so much that we've continued to carry that over in these corresponding years. And so one such event that we recently just did together was we did a fun little fundraising competition amongst ourselves as to which congregation could raise the most money, but all of the money went to this organization called Rise Against Hunger, which is an international organization that brings all of these different foods to a location, and then we all package that food, and that food then gets sent internationally to where there are a lot of needs for it. And so the fun thing that came about it was the pastors participating said that for incentive for our congregations to raise this money, we would be willing to put our hair on the line, and that we would all dye our hair some wild, fun, crazy color. And the winning congregation would have the power to save one pastor from having to dye their hair. It could be their own pastor, could be any pastor amongst the group. So I raised the ante with my congregation because we were behind originally when we started, and I said, we can be doing better. So not only will you have that power if you win, but if you choose not to spare me, I will let you choose what color I dye my hair. And so we won, and they spared another pastor, which was totally fine, and so they chose for me to dye my hair purple. So that is why I currently have purple hair. It is a part of a larger collaborative community fundraising event to help those in need out of our Christian call and our Christian faith. And our community, I will say, so Stu Bush here he's a part of the Open Link. That's also in that same community and a part of that same ministerium. And we work really collaboratively together. It's a really awesome ministerium where we do a lot for the community all together, or we try to at least.
And you know what? What a perfect way to end. Remember the joy. We get all caught up in the hard part. But we're all doing this because we find joy in it. You ended us perfectly.
Can I add one thing? You talked about working with politicians and having some political clout. I did reach out as many organizers to our politicians, our local politicians, and I want to tell you that Matt Bradford's office is here. The other ones didn't show up. So if you could just stand up and let them know.
Thank you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move over to doing a success story. We're going to invite Sandy Lawrence to come back up again and just do a success story of her experiences in Philadelphia. And then finally, we're going to end with a closing with our Health and Human Service Director, Tara Gadan. I want to take this opportunity to again reach out and ask you to please fill out those surveys before you leave here. Somebody did mention about having a follow-up meeting to this. We already have that scheduled, which is very good. We do want to have a follow-up on November 19th here at the same location. What we're going to be doing is asking people, based on the survey responses, to please come out to that. And that's really going to be starting to develop the Interfaith Coalition and what we're going to be doing forward. So if you're interested in coming to that, please fill out that survey, let us know that you're interested, and indicate whether or not you're interested in becoming a steering member for that committee as well, too. But without further ado, I'll pass it over to Sandy.
Show some love, show some love. It's been a long day. Okay, real quick on the story. I was born, no, I'm not going to tell you the age or the weight or the time, but I think part of my journey was I originally worked in children and youth, as a matter of fact, foster care and adoption, Russell, and then eventually I actually opened up a black adoption agency. I had that for several years. Then one day, doctor called, and my daddy was sick, who was never sick, and the doctor calls me and says, look, your father doesn't have sciatica. He's got, final stage prostate cancer, maybe 3 months to live. How do you tell somebody who's about to go on a cruise with his wife that he's about to, have this issue to transition? So I closed my agency, and I did what I should do. The word said, honor thy mother and thy father for my days. I became a caregiver. Then my mother, who was a breast cancer survivor for 25 years, she went out of remission after daddy passed, and the doctors kept saying 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. It lasted almost 3 years. So I stepped out on faith. No job, no income, no nothing, closed everything. And then one day, my girlfriend Lois says to me, Sandy, after both parents had transitioned, there's a job at PCA for someone to do interfaith outreach. I'm like, Lois, all my background is children and youth. I've never worked with about old people. She said, girl, what you been doing all this time but working with old people? I mean, my church, I became the specialist because I was so good at when people were ending life and transitioning, I was the one, and then I was the one they called for things. So I became the specialist of death. Can you imagine that at your church? And based on my experiences with both parents, and I realized when I first went into this with my parents, I didn't have a clue as to resources to help them because they were always vibrant and functioning. So I had to learn about things myself. And it was a hard journey to find out things when you need it. That's when you need it, but you don't have time to find it. So what happened is, I said, okay, Lois, I went for the interview, took the job. I interviewed with them, and I actually interviewed them, because, you can go 3 years without money, and you're never hungry. Your child, you still put them through college. You didn't lose your house. You still, A, B, C, D, because, God provided. I can interview them. Okay, look, I know I'm going to be covered because I'm going to be fed. I won't be naked. I won't be hungry. And I have a roof over my head because it's worked thus far. So I interviewed them, and I accepted the position. And I told them, don't micromanage me. Let me do my thing. And my thing was working with the faith community, because I was part of the faith community as a lay leader in the faith community. So the group that I was responsible for had already been conceived the year before, and it was the Interfaith Clergy Aging Interfaith Coalition Group. It was supposed to be interfaith. Matter of fact, I have, other than Sharon, one of our earlier members, hey sweetie, my sister beloved, she is here. So we even stretched out to Montgomery County because she began to call, and we had that user-friendly thing. I said, okay, as you can tell, I'm a very friendly person and I'm very real. What you see is what you get. So I knew I had to go into the community and not have the community come to me. So what happened was I went to this interfaith meeting with our group, and it wasn't interfaith. It was all Christian-based. I'm like, and Sharon. Then we had one Jewish representative. I said, okay, this won't work. So I connected with a couple of the people from the Muslim community. I knew a friend that was a Buddhist. We connected with some Buddhists. So we made these connections. A Quaker, So we tried to mix it up. So everybody came and they began to come to the meetings. We did not meet, as I said earlier, in the house of worship. Why isn't everybody coming? Well, Sandy, they come to just one and we're not comfortable necessarily in that house of worship. And then I said, okay, first of all, we're going to stop always relating because everybody always called it church. And that's okay if you do that, but these were houses of worship because not everybody's a church. And some people get offended because you're not including what they call their thing, So we worked on that and became houses of worship. Then I went to PCA and I said, Philadelphia Corporation for Aging, for those that don't know. And I said, we got to be user-friendly. And I want to be able to hear what they have to say. But we brought the big wigs in. Some of you, your big wigs are here too. And we brought them in. And they came to the meeting. And they actually listened to what some of the needs were of people. But they also came with information. They came to tell them what the future was going to look like, what the funding was available for, and what they had. And not only did we talk about what PCA had to offer, but we brought in the community groups and the grassroots people that, we brought them in so that they could talk about how they offer things. The health system. How do you do a health fair? Well, first, let's hook you up with the nurses and the people that come and do the blood testing and all that and sit there and do all that for you. How do you get connected to them? We became the outlet for them to get the connections. Our coalition was the hookup. Okay, we were the hookup. So we allowed you to hook up with all the people that were in positions to bring something to your faith community and not just have the faith community come to them. And one of the biggest ways for us was the vouchers. They said before for years, can't mix church and state, said can't mix this, can't do it. And then one day they said, but every year, they were like, Sandy, can you go and tell your coalition members, can they please send their people here? No, let's go to them. And we used the politicians as well. They joined our coalition group, some of their representatives, and they always shared what they had to offer. So everybody went back empowered, and they weren't just your pastors. They were your clergy representatives that were assigned to this coalition. There's an esteem, there's a sense of empowerment when you know, and lay leaders in charge of the senior ministries or the youth ministries, whatever your services are, they came and they belonged. And when they come out, they're like, wow, I'm part of this coalition. And every meeting, they had something to take back with them, a resource, a phone number, a name. I know your name now. I have your card. I feel good because I can call you if I have a situation and you can tell me what to do and you won't treat me wrong or make me feel like I'm nobody because you don't have time to deal with me on your level. So if you come, PCA knew, user-friendly. You have to be user-friendly and a respecter of the differences. And that's what we did. So when people are hungry, we brought in Fill Abundance. They talked about whatever. We brought the supermarket people in that were the ones that had the power to hook your house of worship up to be able to get freebies from them on a regular basis for your food bank. We brought in the people that were in positions to make a difference, which gave them authority to go back and say, so-and-so from Giant's supermarket said, and we'll call that person and we're going to set up a relationship. And the next thing you know, they're getting donations from Giant and they're getting it from Superfresh and all the others because they met all those people in positions to make a difference at those meetings. So they came to these meetings knowing they were coming to meet with people that they can hook up to supply the needs of their congregants and their community. But again, not always the pastors. They don't always have time. It's good we had some that did, but not a lot. But they came to the conferences. We did conferences twice a year, which was a big deal. You pick a topic. Every meeting, you had a particular topic, and you had the experts there to address it on a level that the lay people needed to hear. And then you had resources in the room like you did today. You were networking. Nobody better leave here without a card from all these people that talked about what they can do for you, and they better get your card or name and number so they can call you and ask you, can they come to your house of worship and do this for you? So that's basically the story. It went from about 25 members, and when I left PCA last year, we had approximately 400 on the mailing list, and we always had a house full to capacity for all our meetings and waiting lists for people to get in. So we would only send 2 representatives per group after a while, and then on the big conferences at the hotel, we were able to maybe change it to 5. So was it worth it for you, my beloved sister? Could you call me anytime you wanted to say, Sandy, I need help with whatever? Did I help you? Was PCA a nicer place for you? Yeah. And they didn't like us before that. Well, them, because I'm no longer working, they ain't got no job, ain't got no paycheck. But they didn't really like us or trust us before then. But we came into their houses. We came into the mosque. We came into the synagogues. We came into wherever. We came into their houses. And for that, all I want you to do is be a respecter of others' faiths and embrace the similarities, and also make sure that the houses of worship must be user-friendly, and also the social service agencies must be user-friendly. Thank you. Be blessed. You're welcome.
God bless you. Wonderful, wonderful. You know, I always love, I'm Tara Godin, I'm director of the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. And, you know, I love get to do the closing, right? Because by the time an event is over, I am so full of hope and joy and inspiration. And Sandy, thank you so much. It's funny, last night, yes. You know, last night thinking about today, and you know, a word came to me. It was inspiration, right? So me, I'm like, well, you know, what does Webster say about? You know, I love a word, right? And I want what's the real meaning behind this word? And it says, to inspire is to breathe into, right? And also to breathe into, to cause action or movement, right? So I was looking all day, I was feeling the inspiration, but I'm like, there it is, right? There it is, right? So a movement into action, right? And so thank you for that. And I want to thank the first Montgomery County Interfaith Coalition and the original founders. Now we have this, a clap to all of them. Right, so now you are the founders, right? And so thank you so much. And I know it was a labor of love, with love, and for love. So thank you. And we really, really hope to continue this momentum today. And one thing about inspiration, I found in my life, a lot of inspiration comes from stories, right? So some of the greatest memories of my childhood are my dad telling me a bedtime story, right? And he used all kind of fairy tales and folklores, and coming from a Christian household, some of my favorites were from this children's Bible. It was huge. And oh, you already know where I'm going, right? Right? And it was this big, big, big white Bible, and we got it from Kitty City. Who remembers Yes, right? Yes, right? So that was one of my favorites, right? But I would have to say, my second favorite were a book of tales that originated from Native American, African, and Aboriginal stories, right? So those fairy tales, those folklores, those parables were my favorites. And so in the spirit of kind of inspiration and storytelling and sharing, I want to share with you one of those stories, okay? This is called The First Sunrise. Long, long ago, the earth was dark. There was no light. It was very cold and very black. Huge gray clouds kept the light and the warmth away. They hung so low that the animals had to crawl around. The ostrich hobbled, neck bent almost to the ground. The antelope couldn't hop, and none of the birds could fly high. The animals lived by crawling around the damp, dark earth, feeling for fruits and berries. Often it was hard to find food for several days would pass between meals. The warthog became so tired of people bumping into him that he dug himself a burrow and learned to sleep for long periods of time. Eventually, the birds decided that they had had enough. They called a meeting of all the animals.
The Cory birds decided that they would raise the sky by gathering sticks and pushing the sky up. All the animals agreed it was a good idea, and they set about gathering sticks. The Cory birds each took a big stick and began to push at the sky. The ostriches, the antelopes, and the warthogs watched as the Cory birds pushed the sky slowly upwards. They used the stick as levers, first resting the sky on low boulders, then on small hills. And as the animals watched, the Cory birds, pushing and straining, reached the top of a small mountain. It was still very dark, but at least the ostrich could straighten up a little bit. And the antelope was able to move in long, proud hops. The Cory birds kept pushing the sky higher and higher until they reached the highest mountain in the whole land. Then, with a mighty effort, they gave the sky one last push. The sky shot up into the air, and as it rose, it split open, and a flood of warmth and light poured through onto the land below. The whole sky was filled with beautiful reds and yellows, and that was the first sunrise. Overjoyed about the beauty, the light, and the warmth, the Cory birds burst into song. As their loud singing carried across the land, the sun woke up and began to rise slowly. So inspired by the singing and the sight of the new high sky, the sun lit its torch and began to dance towards the east, then towards the west. This joyful dance of the sun across the sky with its torch lit high was the first light of dawn. And that is why, to this very day, when the sun wakes and lights this early morning fire, all the Cory birds greet it with their beautiful singing lifted high and strong towards the great wondrous sky. This story so much reminded about us today and why we're gathered here today. The Cory bird is Africa's largest flying bird, right? So it's the heaviest flying animal. So it weighs about 45 pounds, about 4 feet tall. It has a wingspan about 9 feet across, right? So it's huge. And at its biggest, it is considered the biggest flying animal, right? So being a heavy and large bird, it avoids flying at all costs, right? So it's going to take a lot of effort to fly, right? But when alarmed or when the occasion calls, they will gather its strength, right? They will take the burden of its body and it will go into flight. So what is remarkable about this tale is that the Cory bird, knowing full well that it's going to take a lot of extra effort and strength to get up and fly, that the task would strain his body sometimes beyond its limits, that this courageous bird, they were the ones that answered the call and said, you know what, we're going to do what we can do to change the situation. So I thought about the suffering and the triumph in this story and how it mirrors so much of the many true stories that we encounter, the people who come to us for help, the people that we've touched, right? Sometimes they come to us with the first, the last, or their only hope, right? Those fleeing domestic violence, those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorders, those with disability issues, those isolated seniors, those who are hungry, those who are depressed, unemployed, those suffering, those stigmatized, right? And I can go on and on and on in what I call the stories from the front lines, right? So we are the front lines, we're the first responders. Some have happy endings and far too many have not happy endings. And this is why, inspired by this tale, the very first dawn, we must never stop strengthening our sticks. As a collective, as a coalition of faith, as partners together in this work, as a tribe of courageous Cory birds, we must never stop making sure our sticks are thick enough to handle the weight of those huge gray clouds that keep the light and warmth away from far too many of the children, individuals, and families of Montgomery County. That is why together we must never stop making sure our sticks are far-reaching, solid, and robust so that we can continue to push the sky higher and higher, pushing through the darkness so that all can feel and see and live the benefits of a new dawn. We must never stop gathering our sticks, our courage, our stamina, our hope, our love, and our faith
so that everyone in Montgomery County, no matter who they are, what they need, or where they live, can have access to the help and the services they need. And our sticks may look different, right? Different shapes, different sizes, different strengths, different abilities, different faiths, but together our sticks are big. Big enough to push the sky up for even the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, and the most stigmatized. Big enough to wake up the sun. And I love the part of the story that says they use the sticks as levers, first resting the sky on low boulders, then on small hills. And as the animals watched the Cory birds pushing and straining reach the top of a small mountain, they pushed and pushed until they reached the highest mountain in the whole land. I know, we all know in this room that it is not enough to just gather sticks, right? But together with our collective voices, we must leverage our sticks. First on boulders, then on hills, then on mountains. And just like those Cory birds, as we build together with a common vision, together with shared resources, together bringing and sharing our various and diverse gifts, I truly believe that our collective work, our coalition of faith, our collective singing will not only wake up the sun, but make it dance across the sky and change this county forever. And finally, as we leave here today, I want you to know that there is not one organization, not one institution, not one person who can bring the power and the vision of the Interfaith Coalition to life. We need each other. No matter how big the stick, no one Cory bird could lift up the entire sky by itself. And please know that the county intends to be right here with you, right? We're strengthening and enlarging and making our sticks bigger and bolder and better to help be part of the collective Cory Bird Nation. I just made that up, Cory Bird Nation. Wow, we're gonna get a T-shirt, Cory Bird Nation. Yes, right? I was inspired. And I'm so heartened to know that by your very presence today, you have committed to doing the same. So together, let us keep pushing and pushing and pushing the sky up so that we can all see the light of a brand new dawn. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Let's do this. Let's push the sky up for the entire county of Montgomery. We are all depending on it. Thank you. God bless.
If you have your surveys, put them on the table at the end as you're leaving, please. Thank you.